All right. Welcome back, Todd, to the Biohacker Babes. Thanks for joining us again.
Super excited to be here. Lots to talk about since we met last.
Yes, we figured in 2 years, probably a lot has happened in maybe the wine industry, maybe behind dry farm wine. So we're gonna definitely get into all of that. For anyone that missed our episode 2 years ago, we did uncover a lot of the dirty secrets of the wine industry, but it sounds like we have even more to learn about today. So we definitely want to chat about that. And this is such an important topic because I think all three of us would agree we still want to enjoy our wine. And so it's how do we do that and keep it in a healthy, balanced way? And this is the solution. So as we roll into the holidays, what a wonderful topic to talk about. So we're grateful to have you back. So Todd, to kick us off, why do you love wine so much? Why is this such a great part of the human experience?
Listen, this is like an amazing part of what makes wine so beautiful. So I've been drinking wine my entire adult life. In fact, I first tasted wine when I was 9 years old. And I've been a wine aficionado forever. I love drinking wine. I drink wine every single day, except when I'm on an extended water fast. So I do extended water fasting about once every 6 weeks or so for 3 to 5 days. That's the only time I don't drink wine. Every other day, I drink wine. I love wine. I drink a lot of wine. Wine creates community. Wine creates access. You know, wine opens the soul for sharing. Wine creates love. I mean, there's just many things that this, unspoiled natural wine is just this. Look, wine has been a part of our culture for 9,000 years. It's been at the cornerstone of all of our cultural institutions, from religion to the arts to all forms of cultural milestones. Wine has been there. It continues to be there even for religion today. And so, I think wine's just an incredible thing and something I derive a great deal of pleasure from, in the taste and the ritual of it, and getting that warm wine buzz and that sense of euphoria, which I also love getting high. But let me say this, and this probably surprises people the most to hear me say this. Let me be perfectly clear. Alcohol is a dangerous neurotoxin. It ruins millions of lives a year. Some people shouldn't drink at all. And if you don't drink today, I'm not recommending that you begin. Furthermore, I would go on to say that it's possible that my path of wellness might be better served if I didn't drink at all. I don't know. I'm not going to find that out because I'm going to continue to drink wine. But I just want to be, clear on the record, and it surprises people. I thought this guy's the wine guy. He's here to sell wine. I'm not here to sell wine. What I'm here to do is educate you about how to think about conscious drinking if you decide you want to drink. And so for me, I am definitely going to drink. Now, I don't drink anything but wine. I don't drink anything but low alcohol natural wine. We can talk about why. But let's be clear, it's not for everyone. And it's not a great idea for everyone. But for those people who decide that they want to drink and are going to drink, my goal is to help them think more consciously about how to do that.
Absolutely.
I think that's so important. I think the three of us definitely agree. I think it's important to highlight that it is a neurotoxin. I always think about Professor David Nutt's image. Have you seen that graphic where it lays out all of the substances? At the very top is alcohol. So it's comparing harm to the person that drinks and to others. And alcohol is by far the most harmful. And at the very bottom, it's mushrooms, LSD. But alcohol is totally legal. People across the world abuse it all the time. But I do think it's important. I love that you brought up the love and the community and the social aspect. I think about that when I watch like Game of Thrones, House of Dragons. Like, it's been a part of human culture for so long. Of course, these are historical in origin.
It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Let's just to be thoughtful about it. And listen, I'm occasionally overserved. It's an occupational hazard of being in the wine business.
I'm sure.
So I don't make any apologies for getting drunk, but I'm kind of like one of those happy drunks, right? So I'm just a lover. alcohol is a lot like money. So alcohol just
us.
amplifies whoever you already are, right? So if you're an asshole, you just become a bigger asshole, right? And
totally
magnification.
like my brother's an asshole, right? And when he drinks, he just becomes belligerent, becomes a bigger asshole, right? So it's just like, people who are lovers are funny. People who are funny just become funnier when they drink, right? So it's just like this kind of thing where money does the same thing to people. It just amplifies whoever you already are. If you're a bad actor, you just become a worse actor, right? I mean, if you're generous and loving and philanthropic, you just become more generous, right? So said. These things are just amplify the underlying state of who we already are. And I was just a funny kind of lover. And so when I drink, I just become more loving and more funny, right? And so that's just, which I think is a good thing. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the same way.
I'm sure you are. I could tell from looking at you.
Woo! Yeah. That was the hardest thing is I think, especially as I aged, I noticed more and more when I drank wine, like conventional wine, I immediately feel tired. I get a headache. I sleep like crap. And so it was like, well, what do? I just got to stop drinking wine. Well, no, then I, discovered dry farm wines 3, 4, 5 years ago, whatever. And I don't feel that way. So I still get all the happiness and the laughter and the community, but then I don't have to suffer. I mean, like you even said, maybe my HRV would be higher. Maybe my sleep would be a little bit better if I didn't drink any
your
alcohol.
Oura ring would tell you slept a little bit better.
But I don't,
you know what?
I'm not going to find out.
On all that fun.
Yes.
So,
all the memories.
Forget about it. And the enjoyment of pure, beautiful, natural wine. Well, let's talk about why you feel bad. Here's the deal. And this is part from, we talked about some of this on the first episode, what we call the dirty, dark secrets of the wine business. And so, there's 76 additives approved for the use in winemaking, legally approved for the use in winemaking, not by anybody particularly important. It's these additives are approved by the Trade and Tax Bureau, which is the federal agency that has oversight over alcohol labeling. Let's just talk about how confusing all this is for a moment. So most of these rules and regulations and laws were written post-prohibition in the early 1940s. So they're crazy outdated. They don't make any sense. They're a hodgepodge put together across. So here's the deal. The TTB, which used to be called the ATF before Waco. Remember Waco? They went down and burned down this guy's house, and then they changed the name from the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau to the Trade and Tax Bureau to make it a little softer, right? So the TTB is the federal agency that oversees the labeling of wine. Now, they don't oversee much else to do with it because in each state, they also have an alcohol department. So each state is regulated at the state level, and in some states, even at the county level. So you have this myriad of regulations, some which match, some which make sense, some which don't make any sense. But one thing is clear, the government and the wine industry are in bed together, and they make for strange bedfellows, right? Now, Washington, D.C., I think is a beautiful town. It has some redeeming architecture. But the bedmates that find themselves together in Washington, not so much the kind of sausage they make over on K Street, which is all the lobbying firms. So this is sort of how business is done in Washington, is that legislation is exchanged for money, right? And legislation is crafted in this exchange of power and influence. This is just how it works. And it works that way for every industry, right? It's not special to the wine industry, but let me give you an example. We were talking about this just before we came on. 19 years ago, a 16-page petition was filed with the TTB requesting from a whole bunch of scientists and important health thinkers and thought leaders in Washington from a group called the Center for Science and Public Interest. It's a nonprofit in Washington. They filed a 16-page petition outlining very specific requests for the transparency and labeling of alcohol products, including wine, for ingredients and nutritional information and blah, 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 a whole bunch of 16-page petition. That petition sat stale, unanswered for 19 years. And 2 weeks ago, this nonprofit filed a lawsuit against the Treasury Department over it. Now, that will not get us transparency in labeling because this nonprofit, which has a $14 million annual budget, can't stand up against the Goliath of K Street and the lobby powers that the alcohol industry employs, at the tune of tens of millions of dollars a year. So we won't get transparency in ingredient labeling in wine, but if we did, here's what it would tell you. The dirty, dark secret of the wine industry. There's 76 legally approved additives by the TTB. Now, I don't know why the TTB is specially employed to make decisions about what goes in your wine, but here's what they do is they keep it secret because there's no contents labeling on a bottle of wine. That's not an accident. The wine industry spent millions of dollars in lobby money to keep contents labeling off. Why? I'll tell you why. Let me describe these 76 additives. Some of them are natural, in fairness. 2 of them are acute toxins classified by the National Institute of Health, which also happens to be a government agency. So it's kind of interesting that you got one agency saying one thing, you got another agency. I'm going to go with the National Health Institute as opposed to the TTB. So the NIH calls 2 of them acute toxins. Acute toxins have a very specific clinical definition. Acute toxin means that you will suffer severe health reactions or death with a single dose within 24 hours, a single dose or multiple doses within 24 hours. That's the clinical definition of an acute toxin. So 2 of these additives are acute toxins. One of them is the most dangerous toxin in the arsenal. It's called dimethyl dicarbonate. It's used to sterilize wine and treat it from the single most common bacterial fault that occurs in wine called Brettanomyces. So this chemical, dimethyl dicarbonate, which is highly toxic, has to be applied to the wine from technicians in hazmat suits. And if you drank the wine within 24 hours of treatment, you could die.
Oh, wow.
Now, 9 of these additives are classified by the NIH as corrosive, like drain cleaner, 34 are classified by the NIH as an irritant. 2 are flammable. 12 are specifically noted by the NIH as a health hazard. 3 are made from 6 animal organs, including cow liver, cow stomach, pig pancreas, and fish bladder. So if you care about animals, you don't want to be drinking those products either.
Interesting.
Wow.
I don't know that your average vegan knows about that.
2 of them, well, there's more animal products than just the organs. There's also milk and egg whites. I left cow liver and pig stomach off. But so in total, you've got 8, but 6 of them are animal organ derivatives. We're here to harvest grapes. We don't harvest organs from pigs.
Right? Thank you.
So 2 of them contain mycotoxins, and 1 of them contains the dreaded ochratoxin A, which is a very specific mycotoxin that you might remember Dave Asprey got a lot of fame for mold-free coffee. Now, in Europe, this is interesting, we don't sell American wine. There's no American wines made that meet our standards of purity and health. Europe requires, as a matter of law, mycotoxin testing, including ochratoxin A, on all wines. The U.S. does not require that test, and U.S. wines are not tested for it. Now, the standards for mycotoxin in wine are quite stringent. The standard is measured in parts per billion. In coffee, in the EU, you are allowed, coffee is also not lab tested here for for mycotoxins. Not required to be tested. It is required in the EU. So in the EU, the standard for mycotoxins is 10 parts per billion. But for wine, it's even more stringent. You can't have more than 2 parts per billion in wine. So the standard for wine is even more stringent than for coffee in the EU. All of our wines, because they come from the EU, or most of them come from the EU, or from countries that also require mycotoxins testing. So all of our wines are tested for it. But when you drink a U.S. wine, it is not tested for it. The test is pretty expensive, and nobody does it in the U.S. They only test for what is exactly required for them to test for. So these additives are to have a pretty nasty story. Now, the wine industry's response to that is that, well, you know, these additives are used in such small amounts that they're not harmful to you. My reply to that is, I don't want to drink them in any amount. And I'm not sure who it is that decides that they're harmful or not harmful in what amount. The FDA has made some rulings on some of these additives in what's called generally regarded as safe. That is an official FDA term. But my point is, whether or not I know how I feel when I drink commercial wine is very different than I feel when I drink an additive-free natural wine.
Yes.
And so the thing is, I can't tell you because we don't have the science or the studies to know which of these toxins or the combination of them are causing you to feel bad. Most people think this is just how you feel when you drink wine. It's not really how you feel when you drink pure natural wine, right? And so there's no, I can't tell you that, well, if you skip the dimethyl dicarbonate or the ammonia phosphate or the copper sulfate, or, you know, if you skip any of these additives, you're going to feel better. Well, first of all, you wouldn't know whether they're in your wine or not because there's no contents labeling on it. Number two, I can't tell you which ones are harmful or not harmful to you or making you feel bad or not making you feel bad. There's no research to support that. What I can tell you and what you can tell me is that when you drink pure natural wine, you feel better, right? And you don't have the same adverse reactions you have to these commercial wines that may or may not contain who knows what, because we don't know what's in them because they don't have a contents label because they don't want you to see what's in it. So most wines are like processed foods. They'd have a big label on it with a whole bunch of names and stuff. You had no idea what was in it. Now, I don't eat those kinds of foods. I don't eat packaged food
either.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And so now, invariably, look, we live in the real world. Let's talk real talk. Invariably, you know, we're going to all come in contact with environmental toxins. We're going to come in contact with toxic substances all the time. But I want to minimize that, and especially for something I drink every day, right? So real talk is none of us are living a pure life, and I don't care to what extent that you pursue the purity of what you put in your body, you're going to still be exposed to some toxins. But here's the deal. I don't want to drink them if I don't have to, right? And I want to feel better, not only about how I'm treating the planet with organic farming and regenerative soil health. I want to feel better about saving the planet by not using irrigation. The name of our company is Dry Farm Wines. We don't allow the use of irrigation in the farms we work with. Saves over 1 billion gallons of water a year. So I want to feel better about that, and I'm going to feel better about saving the planet and doing the best I can to control what goes in my body. Right, and every time we eat out, I don't care where you eat. Every time you eat out, you lose control of the exact knowledge of what you're putting in your body. I eat out all the time. That's a reality. But I'm also taking my own wine, or I'm also drinking natural wine when I'm out. So I'm just going to take the opportunity. Don't want to get up on this soapbox and say that, oh, I'm living this pure life. That's not true. But what is true is I want to drink wine that tastes better and makes me feel better because I drink it every day, right? And here are the reasons why. So how do we get here? Let me just round this around. How do we get here? We got here, like everything else that's scaled in a negative way, generally speaking, in the United States, we got here over money and greed. And so what happened in the wine industry is exactly what happened in the food industry, which is fueled by cheap public money from Wall Street. You had a handful of companies and private equity groups that went out and rolled up the wine industry. Well, what's that mean? Rolled up the industry it's an investment term. It means that you go out and you consolidate the industry into some big companies. And then those big companies have scale. They can make stuff cheaper and faster. They have distribution channels to get it out cheaper and faster. And so the whole focus in the consolidated wine industry, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, is not to make wine that's better for you or even to make better wine. It's to make wine faster and cheaper in these gigantic factories in Central California. So everything I've told you, everything I'm about to tell you, you can verify with a Google search. This is not my opinion or some marketing spin from Todd. This is like, you can go to Google and you can search this and you can see for yourself. Everything. FDA approved additives, NIH toxins, size of the wine industry, the players in it. For example, the top 3 wine companies make over 52% of U.S. wines, and the top 30 wine companies in the United States make over 70% of U.S. wines. So when you walk in the grocery store where somebody has paid to buy shelf space, maybe it's end cap, maybe it's at eye level, all that shelf space is for sale too, all over the grocery store, pay to play. When you look at rows and rows of wine, hundreds or thousands of bottles, most of these wines are made by just a handful of companies. Now, they don't want you to know that. So they hide behind thousands of brands and labels to confuse you, right? And
take away our choice.
And, whoa, that's another one. The 3-tier system, how alcohol is distributed in the States, must come into a distributor who then sells to a wholesaler, who then sells to a retailer, who then sells to you. It's called the 3-tier system. It's federally mandated. And why would the government mandate that? Well, when that law was written in the 1930s, early 1940s, the reason they required these approved distributors that hold a federal license, the reason they created what's officially known as the 3-tier system. I'll tell you how this restricts your choice and why you won't see natural wines in your grocery store. So in the late 1930s, organized crime, because of prohibition, organized crime controlled the flow of most of the alcohol products in the United States, most of it coming out of Canada, illegal whiskey, right? Al Capone and the mafia. So the government said, we want to make sure that the mafia doesn't control the distribution of alcohol. So we're going to create this system of distribution that we're going to monitor. Well, today that's no longer a risk. Today it's a rigged system between these legacy distributors, right? And they're, most of them at the state level, they're state legislators that protect them. Now, here's why that limits choice for you. Because the distributor, he's not interested in working with a family farm in Europe. He wants to work with this gigantic wine company that makes the inflow of product cheaper and faster and more profitable for everybody. We don't have to work with a whole bunch of different people. We will work with these 2 or 3 big giant companies that bring all this product in, right?
Easy.
And then they got big advertising budgets because they're huge multi-billion-dollar conglomerates that can place magazine ads, in food and wine magazines. And the way this is done is super interesting. So in 2004, I give you an American classic, one of the great wine countries stories of all time, one of the great wine families of America and friends of mine. In 2004, Robert Mondavi and the Mondavi family. No doubt you're familiar with Mondavi wines.
Sure.
Robert Mondavi actually is on the cover. He's been dead for about a decade now. He's on the cover of Wine Spectator magazine, which is the leading trade magazine for wine in the United States, and leading consumer and trade magazine. Robert Mondavi's picture is on the cover of Wine Spectator this month, and the story is the known and the unknown of the great Napa Valley legend, Robert Mondavi. Robert Mondavi created what is known as today more or less the Napa Valley. And so Robert Mondavi in 1966 commissioned a very famous California architect, his name is Cliff May, to design this very iconic, still there today and beautiful, this very iconic tasting room. It was the first one of the first, arguably the first architecturally driven sort of modern tasting rooms that then created what we know today as the Napa Valley, which is filled with architecturally redeeming wineries and tasting rooms. They're really entertainment facilities. All right. It's not much wine made there. So in 1966, Robert Mondavi, who was this great American leader, I mean, pours wines at the White House. I mean, just a legend, and created today what we know as the Napa Valley. Well, in 2004, fast forward, after he built this ginormous wine company, right? It gets sold for $1.2 billion in 2004 to one of the top 3 wine companies in the world, publicly traded company in New York. Now, here's how this works. So let's say at the time that Robert Mondavi, which was a pretty big company, was producing about 1 million cases of wine a year. Still factory wine. I mean, it's a big wine company. Now, on every bottle appears this iconic winery that's in Oakville, California, in the heart of the Napa Valley. Most every bottle has this iconic winery on the front of it, right? But that wine's not made there, right? So you buy
storybook picture.
You buy it for like $1 billion. Well, you open up a Food and Wine magazine and you'll see a 2-spread page ad of this beautiful girl and her soon-to-be husband or boyfriend, wandering, wafting through the vineyard in front of the iconic Robert Mondavi winery, right? To suggest that all Mondavi. Well, so this company, they'll buy it, and let's say they add another 25 SKUs. Instead of running 1 million cases a year, they make 25 million cases a year, right? But it's this name association with this great American family, right? So then that's how you pay $1 billion for something. 2004, $1 billion meant something. Today, it seems everybody's got $1 billion, but it's like back then, it's like when it really meant something. So then you quadruple the production, right, by making wines cheaper, with industrial farm fruit or wherever you get your fruit from. It's worth noting, only 5% of U.S. vineyards are organic. 5%. So 95% of all wine out there produced in the United States is chemically farmed. And less than 1% is dry farmed. So virtually everything in the United States is irrigated. And there's a whole bunch of problems why that's wrong too. So anyway,
the organic ones are probably contaminated at this point.
Well,
you think?
There have been studies on that. There have been 2 studies, and this is interesting. There have been 2 separate studies that have been published. And in fairness, neither were peer-reviewed. They're pretty small studies, but they were done by consumer groups that did glyphosate testing. Glyphosate is the active chemical in Roundup. Roundup is the #1 herbicide applied in U.S. vineyards. You can look at a vineyard and tell if it's been treated with Roundup because there's nothing growing beneath the vines. And it has a very dark moonscape. Looks like lava. It's super hard, right? And so of the wines that were tested from 5 appellations, Napa, Sonoma, Paso Robles, wherever they were, both organic and non-organic wines tested positive for glyphosate. So they speculate, there's been speculation, this is not proven, they speculate that the glyphosate got into the wine through irrigation. Because the way glyphosate or Roundup is applied in a vineyard is very different than, say, in a wheat field. So you also have this problem in wheat where organic wheat gets contaminated with glyphosate. Because when you apply glyphosate or Roundup to a wheat field, it's done from a drone or a plane, right? Now, usually drones, but in the old days, they'd be doing it with planes. That creates a huge opportunity for overspray to drift into neighboring organic areas. That's not how it's applied in a vineyard. In a vineyard, the apparatus sits very close to the ground. And so it's not flown over. It's sprayed very close to the ground. So you don't have the same risk of massive overspray going into. This is the reason they speculate is coming through irrigation because you don't have the same risk of overspray. I know we could go down a couple of wormholes here, but all of these things are, if you care about what you put in your body, and if you care about how you feel, then you should care about what's in your wine, right? And we could talk for several hours about any of these topics. They're very complicated, right? They're convoluted. They're all twisted up together, right? Just like, I'll give you another example of something that's twisted up. In the food space, the term natural is actually kind of a BS marketing term, right? Natural suggests that somehow it might be organic or clean or helpful or whatever in the food space, but it actually has zero meaning at all. And if you see something naturally labeled, naturally flavored, just a red flag on a food product.
Run away.
That's not true on wine. Natural wines have a categoric specific understanding globally of what a natural wine is. Additive free, always organic or biodynamically farmed, fermented with wild native yeast. There's a universal understanding of what a natural wine is. So natural in a wine, healthier, better, pure. Natural in a food, not so much maybe, right? And then the other thing is very confusing. People go in and they buy organic wine. Now, see, organic wine is not natural wine. It just means it's organically farmed. It could still contain additives, GMO yeast. It could control, it just means the fruit is farmed organically. It doesn't mean it's a natural wine.
You could start with organic grapes, but it doesn't matter what happens after that.
It doesn't usually. Most of the organic grape wines that we see at retail. The other thing is natural wine, because they ferment with wild native yeast and not a genetically modified lab cultured yeast. You can't make natural wine in very large quantities. And so generally speaking, natural wine growers, these small family farms, can't get the attention of a distributor because they don't have enough volume. They can't get the attention of Whole Foods because they couldn't supply them. Right? I mean, they don't make enough wine to supply 50 Whole Foods, let alone 500, or how many ever there are. Right? So, I mean, they just don't make enough wine. And they're, in Austria or central France. I don't have anybody here to represent them in that way. It's just there's a lot of reasons why you won't go in the store and find natural wine. Now,
or at a restaurant or a bar.
No. That
Very
being
difficult
said,
to find anything that's not American.
Right. That's because of the distribution system. See, it favors these large wine conglomerates. And so typically you see the same wines over and over and over and over again. Right? Because nobody wants to do any extra work, including me.
So true.
Yeah, nobody wants to do any extra work. So we'll just call our friend over here, Mr. Wine Conglomerate, or the three friends that make, virtually everything. And we'll just deal with them, right? And they can move product at scale. And guess what? At scale, everything gets cheaper. So I can pack a whole bunch of different wines onto a truck in my factory in California and take that to you in Chicago, and it's just cheaper, right?
Yeah.
That means there's more markup. More markup means more profit. Everybody loves to be rich.
Yeah,
So
it's a business.
anyway, and I don't listen. I choose to make my living in the wine business, and we make a fine living, and we're happy about it. But not at the expense of the quality of our product or the integrity of who we are and what we believe. So I don't think you have to make a choice between having a successful, profitable business and selling people poison. I don't think you have to make that choice. I think you can say, hey, this is what I stand for. And there's enough people out there who want to stand with me and who want to support our business to the extent that we can make a decent living and provide for lots of families and for my family and people we work with. So and there are a lot of other businesses that make that choice. You know, Patagonia is a great example, or there are a lot of businesses that make choices that decide that based on the integrity, generally the founder, who just says, you know, this is the rules of play for me, right? And fortunately, I also have surrounded myself with a bunch of other people who feel very strongly about this as well. You know, and so they've helped keep the guidepost in place to, you know, we have very stringent standards and we never deviate from them, right? Yeah. And so even if it costs us money.
And you can see that across a lot of other industries, right? I mean, the beauty industry right now, I mean, there's so many new companies that are doing kind of similar to what you're doing. They're holding up their integrity, and maybe their products cost more, and maybe sometimes their products are out of stock, but they are not going to let their standards drop. And, you know, with our dad being a biological dentist, I mean, gosh, the dental industry, you know, they say, you know, mercury in small amounts is okay. But like you said, do we really want any mercury in our body, even if it's safe in small amounts?
I don't want to wait 20 years to find out what that's doing to me.
Right. And a safe amount might be like a tiny filling, where some people have 8 fillings, and then they're drinking hot coffee, and then they're brushing their teeth. Like, you know, they're not thinking about things like that. They're just saying, well, in parts per billion, we know that that's safe. So I think
it's really interesting with wine, because you could argue with dentistry or the beauty industry or foods. Like, I don't always feel the immediate effects of choosing the organic apple, but with natural wines, I feel it immediate. It's like a short-term benefit, and I trust
there's some serious poisons in there. I can't tell you which ones are making you feel bad, or as we said earlier, there's just no research behind it, but there's some pretty nasty additives that don't go into apples. Right.
Yeah,
sure. I mean, I know when I drink a normal commercial wine, I mean, my nose itches right away. I have a headache instantly.
I have a headache instantly.
Oh, it's awful.
I just can't drink it.
Yeah. So what about, you said there's 2 acute toxins. What is the purpose of those specifically? Are they preservatives, or is it making it cheaper?
They're both related to the sterilization of wine.
Oh, their sterilization, right, from the bacteria.
Right.
Okay.
So one is used to treat very specific bacterial faults, and the other is used to sterilize the wine and act as a preservative, killing everything alive in the wine, including gut-friendly bacteria. Dr. David Perlmutter, who's probably the foremost recognized authority on the relationship between food and the gut microbiome, has written a number of times about the specific healthy bacteria that are found in living natural wines that are not found in commercial wines because they have been sterilized with a large dose of sulfur dioxide, which is one of the 2 acute toxins identified by the NIH. The other one I mentioned is the dimethyl dicarbonate, which is used to treat specific bacterial faults in wine. So when you make wine, there's a couple of risks to the winemaker. One is that the wine gets tainted with a bacterial fault, or a bacteria that creates what are called wine faults. Wine faults are either off-putting aromatics and or off-putting taste in the wine, and it's actually a bacteria.
Thanks.
Some bacteria are healthy from you, some are not. Some have a positive impact, some do not. So the most dangerous of these additives, the dimethyl dicarbonate, is a particular sterilant that is used to solve these bacterial faults. The most common ones, known as Brettanomyces, are just Brett in the wine industry. It's super common. And according to this company who makes this chemical that distributes it to the wine industry, they have used it to treat tens of millions of gallons of wine in California. So you don't know. Now, in fairness to them, let's give you their side of the story. Their side of the story is, well, this toxin, it hydrolyzes into methanol and carbon dioxide. I'm like, well, let's just say that that's true. I don't want to be drinking methanol. The methanol is much, much more toxic than ethanol, right? And so carbon dioxide I'm okay with because it's all around us all the time. But as for the methanol, which has a much higher degree of toxicity than ethanol, I'm not interested in drinking hydrolyzed methanol either. So even if this is true, even if this toxin that will kill you, burn your skin, or burn your lungs if you inhale it, right? Even if this toxin does hydrolyze into methanol, I'll skip my hydrolyzed methanol in my dose today too. So this would be funny if it weren't true. It's just so crazy.
You wonder how anyone doesn't feel like shit after drinking this stuff.
I mean, it's just, well, the problem is if you could tell what was in it, maybe you start making some choices based on what you want, which chemical you were willing to drink. But since there's not a label to tell you what's in it, you don't have any idea. So that, ladies, is the story of the American wine business. And it's
fast,
a wild
cheap,
one.
Easy. Yeah. So tell us about Dry Farm, because I think there's some interesting ways that you guys source and grow that maybe are against like popular misconceptions in the wine industry, like sulfites or sugar, the fermentation process.
Dry Farm Wines, our company, and the wines that we drink and sometimes sell, these wines have a certification that we created. It's the most stringent certification on wine in the world as it relates to purity and health. And so our certification, we sell only lower alcohol wines. So we sell wine between 7% and 12.5%. Average American wines now are hovering around 15%. Most of the wines I drink are between 10 and 11%. I prefer the taste of a lower alcohol wine, and I prefer having lower doses of alcohol over the course of my evening. Now, I'll drink 1+ bottles of wine per night. So don't worry, I'm still getting high, although it's lower alcohol. People are like, well, will I get high? Yes, you'll get high. Don't worry. But, the question is, am I cognitive? There's a point when you take high doses of alcohol that you become less cognitive, less responsive, right? Just dumber, right? So I don't really want to get there. I just want to get high and have fun and be cute and witty, right? That's it. And so so we only sell lower alcohol wine. That's one part of the certification. All of our wines are lab tested independently by a certified enologist on our behalf. Every single wine we sell. Not a single wine goes without testing. We're looking for a number of things in those tests. One is sugar. The only way to know if a wine is sugar-free is lab tested, because sugar can hide in wine. And I'm not talking about sweet dessert wines when obviously it has sugar in it, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking about medium kind of bodied wines that you might drink day in and day out can contain sugar, and you won't taste it because the acid level in wine will hide it. It's kind of like when you make lemonade, right? Or if you drank a cola, which has 32 grams of sugar in it, right? You wouldn't be able to drink if it weren't so high in ascorbic acid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd just be too sweet.
Mm.
And so you can't always taste sugar. Even taste professionals, we can't always taste it, but it'll come back positive in a lab test. See, it's worth mentioning, Dry Farm Wine certification, the baseline is natural wine. We go many bars beyond just being natural wine. And so not all natural wines are sugar-free. We reject natural wines all the time for having sugar in them. So just because you're drinking natural wine doesn't mean it's sugar-free.
Got it.
So if you're drinking Dry Farm wines, it's sugar-free. So now sugar-free has a very specific legal definition. You can't just say there's no wines that are completely zero sugar. They've always got some hint. I mean, some fractional hint but the government has established a standard for what constitutes anything that's sugar-free, right? And so we
less than a gram.
Well, our wines are less than a gram per liter. Now, that means less than 0.15% of a liter at the serving level. So it's not even measurable. Statistically and legally, it's sugar-free. Less than 1 gram per liter actually is less than 1 gram in a bottle, because a bottle is 750 milliliters. It's not even a full liter. So that's our standard, which is way below the government standard of sugar-free. That is our standard. So then our wines are sugar-free. They're lower in alcohol. They are organically or biodynamically farmed. They are vegan and vegetarian friendly. They are gluten-free.
No pig stomach?
No pig stomach today.
Or cow liver.
And pancreas. Or what on the TTB list, it's called bovine pancreas. Bovine is cow. So anyway, gluten-free.
Non-GMO yeast. Do you want to talk about
non-GMO yeast? All part of this. All part of the certification. There was something that was skipping my mind. Sulfites. So we also measure for sulfites to ensure that sulfur dioxide has not been added, because sulfites are naturally occurring. When people say, "Oh, sulfites are making me feel bad," that's probably not true.
Right.
Sulfites are naturally occurring in any food that's fermented. They're naturally occurring in many types of food. But anything that's fermented contains sulfites. So sulfites are generally not what makes people feel bad. Now let's talk about
but they blame that.
Let's talk about the sulfites.
Yeah.
And sulfur dioxide. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah, here's some water. I've been talking a lot, you see.
I'll drink a little bit.
For like an hour.
I know, you're doing great.
Oh, goodness. I know your friend is coming over. Well,
we're almost
You're my
there.
friends right now, so forget about it.
We're almost there.
No. I was just, my throat was dry. So anyhow, the legal limit for sulfites in the United States is 350 parts per million. Many of these compounds and chemicals are measured in parts per million, parts per thousand, parts per billion. 350 parts per million is the legally allowed cap on sulfites/sulfur dioxide in the United States. Our average wine tests at 39 parts per million. Those are naturally occurring, right? And we don't allow anything over 70 parts per million, because it's been shown that a wine can, although we rarely see it, can be naturally producing up to 70 parts per million. So we have a cap at 70, but our average is 39 parts per million. The U.S. government allows nearly 10 times that amount in your wine. So, and sulfur dioxide is an acute poison, an acute toxin. And if you go to if you go to the interwebs, as I said, and check anything on Google, if you Google acute toxin, you will find the definition as I told you, a single dose or multiple doses over a 24-hour period. And the way I drink, I get multiple doses for sure. And so will cause severe health reactions and or death. So that is the official clinical term for an acute toxin. So anyway, wrapping up, what rapid fire last minute questions do we have?
I have a question. How did you get the bold reds, the new bold reds? Because that is my favorite. That has been my favorite of the boxes so far. Is it higher alcohol or what's the difference?
No. But that is a great observation, because alcohol adds density to wine. And so when you see these big, lauded big Cabernets and these big pedigreed wines, they're always high in alcohol, because alcohol adds bold density to wines. And when you remove alcohol, you remove density. So that being said, no, we just went out and started really searching for, because there was a lot of demand for a bigger, bolder wine. So rather than do that with alcohol, or the other way that it's done with additives or what's known as extractions in the wine industry, there's a number of ways to get a bigger, bolder wine, but most of them have to do with manipulations to the wine. And so we just went out and made a conscious effort to source. There's not a lot of them in the natural wine world. We went out to with a specific goal of sourcing a bigger, bolder red, because people wanted it. I don't drink them.
My husband was waiting for it.
Yeah, he was so excited.
It's very
excited.
Popular among the husbands, because they want to drink what they think are like these big California cabs, and they're like, I want a big wine with my steak. It's like, well, it's the only thing you can drink it with is your steak, because it's so big.
Yeah.
Right. I drink light reds personally, but I just eat lighter foods. I mean, I'm not vegetarian or vegan, but I do eat proteins. But I eat a lot of fish, and I like light red. We sell and I drink what we classify as fish reds, meaning that they're so light, the alcohol's low, and they're so light, and the type of grape is so light that you can easily drink this light red wine with, like white fish, or you couldn't drink like a big California cab with a piece of fish. It's just too overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for doing that. My husband's very happy. I love it too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love all of your offerings. And I think for both of us, Dry Farm has changed our wine experience and relationship to alcohol. I think it's so beautiful. And we're just so grateful for the integrity that you bring and the education with the dirty wine industry. So thank you for
I know it's just so much to cover. It's like to do it in an hour. It's just really hard, because you can only touch on just like how crazy it is. Right?
Yeah.
And
well, can you share any resources if people want to dig into this a little bit more? Is there a good place to look for it? Or a good resource we could share?
No, not really. I mean, not terribly. I mean, there is an app. There's a smartphone app if you live in a major city like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago. I mean, there's an app called Raisin. It's a smartphone app. It works much better in Europe, but it's a map-based locator for natural wine lists, restaurants, bars, retailers. So that's still not a Dry Farm Wine certified health pure wine, but if in the hierarchy of wines that you should be drinking, try to drink organic. That doesn't mean it's natural. It doesn't mean it's sugar-free. It doesn't mean anything else other than it's organic. But that's certainly better than chemical farming. It's better for the earth, and certainly better fruit. Number two, then drink natural wine, right? And natural wine, again, is a very specific thing. And you can, if you live in large city, you can do a Google search for natural wine in your area or download this Raisin app. But again, not all
I got
natural
Raisin
wine.
the last time we spoke.
Nice.
And I found one bar in New York that I went to. It actually really lovely, great wines, very low in alcohol. Felt
Do you remember
okay.
what it was called?
I don't. I could dig and find it. But
I'm going. Yeah. I'd go to most of them. I'm going to New York tomorrow, assuming I can get out of Florida with a hurricane.
Oh, I hope so.
Fingers crossed.
But and so natural wine. But then again, all natural wines are not low alcohol. They're not sugar free. They're not even irrigation free necessarily. That's not a standard of natural wines. Most natural wines in Europe are irrigation free, but it's not a part of the natural wine standard. But with us, it is. So, if you, again, it just, depending upon what your level of kind of pursuit is, what kind of, how high up on the purist level you are, how fanatical you are, there's a hierarchy. And then if you do find yourself in a restaurant that has European wines, then I tend to, even if I know it's not natural, I'm going to look for cooler regions of central France, like Beaujolais, which grows Gamay as the red. I'm going to look for, I never drink American wines. So if nothing about Americans, it's just that I don't like their wine. Right. So if I do order something off of a wine list, I typically order a white or a rosé, typically from France. And then even then, I usually put a little bit of cold spring water in it, bottled water in it, to kind of thin it out just a little bit, lower the alcohol, lower anything else that's in it. And generally, it makes me feel better. So that's another way that you can kind of mitigate if there's a little bit of problem in the wine. If you add water to it, you're just going to dilute whatever's in it, including the alcohol. If you add too much water, it's not going to taste like wine anymore. It's just like you have to kind of tinker with it. But I'll usually drink a white or rosé if I'm drinking out and I don't know the wine or it's not natural, because it's going to have less contaminants in it than the red. It's just kind of how it works, and you'll just feel better. In fact, a lot of women have a difficult time drinking red wine because of the tyramine and histamines in it. And so in traditional wine, our wines don't do that because they're not extracted in the way commercial wines are made. But that being said, so at health conferences, we're the official wine for 100 health conferences or something, and so women will come up and they'll say, I'll take the white. I'll taste your white. I can't drink red. It makes me feel bad. No, have the red. You're gonna feel great. Don't worry about it. I mean, this is different, right? Yeah. So you guys drink red wine,
I only drink red wine. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I do both, but I prefer red. And I'll never forget at the Paleo conference when you had the dry farm party. Like, I'm usually like a 1 glass of wine girl. And at that party, I think I had 4 glasses.
Of course you did.
The next day, I felt great. I was like, what is that?
We had a good time that night. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, thank you, Todd, for sharing your time with us. I'm sure you blew a lot of minds today with this fascinating info. Before we let you run, can you share one final piece of advice with our audience, something they can start doing today to optimize their health?
Oh, wow. Well, for me, I think the grounding practice is meditation for sure. But I would say the most, and it's all health practices, not meditation excluded. I think meditation is great for anybody and everybody. But the second one that has been one of the most profound advancements on my personal wellness and health has been intermittent fasting and extended water fasting. And so it's been the most profound, but fasting is very different from person to person and from male to female. So some women don't fast well, some do. It's a hormonal issue. Depends on each person individually. But for me, that was like, other than meditation, I think fasting was the most significant advancement in my wellness.
Wonderful. This is great timing for our audience to hear, because we just had Dr. Mindy Pelz on to talk about fasting
I love
for women.
Mindy. I've been on Mindy's podcast twice. I also love her. We see each other at podcast. I mean, she's super fasting. Yeah, I'm super into Mindy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And
all right.
We actually
fasting.
are the official wine for Mindy, and they break their fast with our wine, blah, blah, blah. We've done parties with them, fast breaking parties and all kinds of stuff. So yeah.
Very cool.
She's a big fan. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of her. So yes, I'm super faster. I'm like super, super high on fasting, but meditation for all, fasting for some. Peace be with you. I love you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is wonderful.
Bye.
And thanks to everyone that tuned in. We'll see you next time.